right, Shankar, thanks so much for taking the time to do this. I want to start. I know you've been practicing for many years yoga. So I want to start by asking you what you've noticed about yourself, what changes you've noticed within yourself as a result of practicing yoga.
It's a great question, Avi, because why do something unless we some return on investment, right? Unless we see that. I've seen it's one thing that manifests itself in a couple of different ways. Swami Satchidananda and integral yoga teaches us that it's all your name, it's all your form, it's all your deed, and it's all for good. So it's a nice philosophy, but what does it mean to take that into your heart and practice that in your life? Can we really believe that everything that happens to us is all for good, even when it's pain and suffering, or pain and suffering of our loved ones? And I was sitting in a satsang in Yogaville once, and Swami Satchidananda said, "Not an atom moves an inch that is not God's will." And that blew me away, Avi. It blew me away. Because it links up to, right, that it's all for good. So nothing happened that's not for our good. So why am I mentioning this teaching? Is because my evolution has been to embrace that truth further and further. And to embrace that truth further and further, one of the outcomes is increased faith. That this thing that happened to me, no matter how good or no matter how painful, is for good. And if I have that increased faith, then Gurudev always talked about this, and it amazed me. Imagine, he said, living a carefree life where you're not worried about anything. And I don't think I've achieved that fully yet, but I would just say that more and more, I seem to get closer and closer to it. To seeing that things happen, and I'm less bothered by them. Now, maybe in the moment that it happens, I'm shaken up, but the recovery is quicker. And when I talk to other spiritual disciples, how long does it take to recover from something that upsets you is, I think, one metric of growth, right? If it takes weeks and months, that's one thing. If it takes hours, that's something else. So what our viewers don't know is that I'm going to confess my silliness. Avi, I didn't know that our podcasts are also videocasts. So when Avi and I first connected at the beginning of our scheduled time, my room was in disarray. I just moved into this house. There were boxes everywhere. And it was a mess. It was a mess. I wouldn't do that to anybody. So we had to take time. Can I disconnect the camera? Can I read? Where else can I sit? What about the light? I even went to pull down the shade. And this house is new, so I don't know which shades are hand pulled down and which ones are string pulled down. So I pulled on the string pull down and the whole shade came down. But I'm laughing about it, right? Because somehow this was all supposed to be exactly as it was supposed to be. And I'm really not upset about it. I'm just sorry it took up some unscheduled time. So I think because that it is true that everything is happening for our good. And even when something difficult or painful happens, I can somehow hold on to the feet of the Guru, to the anchor of those teachings. And I won't even take credit for it. It's just a gift that I then can remember this. And it just, when I can move into this space, makes me worry-free. So, long answer, Avi, but that's what's come.
So what's the internal process that happens within yourself, if you can describe it? So whether the example that you just gave or anything in life that that comes up that might be considered challenging, right?
Yeah.
Here's the challenging, here's the feeling, the experience, the pain. How do you transform that into a different direction? What happens for you inside?
Right. Right. It's a good question. My training is in corporate America, and I worked in some corporations. There was zero tolerance for error. So I learned to try and prepare and be effective at what I'm doing. So it doesn't mean that you just let everything go and you don't care about anything. It means you do your best, you plan, you exert your effort, you try and be as good as whatever it is the situation is asking for. But then when things don't go as planned, there's a little introspection. There has to be a light turned on facing within at those moments that says, how am I reacting right now? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Am I stressed? Am I anxious? Am I angry? Am I calm? So I think one thing is that self-reflection, that self-awareness is critical. Gurudev used to talk about turning within. Turning within starts with being aware of what's going on in my mind and my body. And then I think and then of course this is not like, okay, I'm saying I'll do step one, turn within, step two. No, it has to happen a little more automatically than that. But then I think the next thing that happens is, why did this happen, right? There's this self-reflection. And I'm always looking to say, what could I have done differently to avoid this? Like if ever you and I have a chance to do a podcast again, I'll have my room ready. But without beating myself up, I just say, all right, is there anything I could have done to avoid this? Yes, okay, next time I'll do it. No, okay, it is what it is. And then probably the third step is to reaffirm that this is all for good. That no matter how you think about it, God, Guru, Divine Mother, Adonai, Jesus, Zarathustra, Buddha, whoever it is that we connect with, to say, your hand was behind this. Now, not to cause me pain and suffering, because we have to acknowledge that we live the results of our past karma. So in a way, we're responsible for everything that happens to us. But still, for me to say, okay, you're telling me it's all for good, I'm going to believe that. And then to move myself into the space where I could let go that this is good. So now that's means we're changing the whole paradigm, right, Avi? Because, it's like a bee stings you, right? Or something happens and you hurt yourself and you go, oh, ow, And the brain doesn't say, oh, that was good. The brain says, holy moly, holy crap. To take that and to redefine that experience as something that has goodness behind it is one of the keys. But I think the other thing that's happening, and you're asking me to go down at a granular level, Abby, so I appreciate that, is to recognize this is for good, but I don't see it now. Don't see it yet. I think that's the whole thing about our spiritual lives. That's this mystery, is that something happens to us at this moment. And we use the moment and our experiences and the immediate outcomes as a metric of is it a good thing or not. But I don't think that's the way the universe goes. I think the universe, it's like a chess game. It's like a chess game. Somebody makes a move. That's not the ultimate move. They're making that move to set up another move 5 moves later. And I think that's how the divine plays with us. That's the grand Leela, right? Is that something happens, but it's part of a larger framework. And so that's where faith comes in, to say, okay, somehow this will end up being good. Maybe I'll learn from it. Maybe I'll change my view of the world from it. Maybe I'll change my behavior. Maybe I don't see it now, but something else will unfold to say, oh, look, that really was for good. And how many times in our lives do we go through difficult experiences? And then when we stop and look back, hours, days, weeks, months, years, and say, oh, it really was a blessing in disguise. I wouldn't be here doing this or that, or I wouldn't be with this person if that didn't happen. So that's what goes on for me. And again, it's a work in progress, because sometimes it will take me days to say, oh, man, this feels so painful. How is this good? And then by God's grace, and it really is, faith is a gift from God. It's not something that I think, yes, you try and cultivate it, but it's ultimately a divine gift. And that gift awakens a little more, and you go, oh, okay, it's okay. It's okay. Did I say it in a way that makes sense, Bobby?
I think so. So what I'm hearing is, you have a practice of remembering that there's a higher level that you can't always see, right, and to trust that there's something for good happening for you in these experiences,
right,
that you're having. Right. And so do you find that the more that you practice, the more proficient you become in going to that place of acceptance and trust?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I find that it's easier to shift into that space and believing that it's true, having the conviction that it's true. I always used to love to think that way, but I couldn't. And it's really only, I don't know how people who are listening relate to this. Does God do this? Does the Divine Mother do this? Does cosmic consciousness do this? Any way that we think about it. But it's more quickly moving into this space that there is some greater force, greater good. Again, call it God, call it Jesus, call it sacred light, whatever we want to call it, that is real, and that is present in our life, and that is guiding everything that happens to us. And of course, it's not rational, right? How can my rational mind understand that? I sometimes think, obviously, okay, this thing, it happened for good. The divine force is behind it. And I think, wait a second now. There's 100 billion things that are happening on this planet to people at a moment. The divine force is behind all of that. And I think, well, wait a second now. This is just one planet. I believe there are many, many other inhabited planets in the universe, and everything that's happening to every living being there is also being directed by the divine being. There's no way that our brain could say, "Oh yeah, I get that." That makes sense to me. No, it doesn't make sense. Though I must confess, there is a metaphor that helps me a little bit, and it is the metaphor of the human body. Look what's going on inside of our body at any time. Look how many cells are working to heal us and keep us healthy and repair disease. Right? And there are probably hundreds of millions of cells doing that all the time, way beyond our understanding. It's not like I cut myself and we say, oh, okay, let's go heal this right now. No, it happens. It's the same force. So sometimes it helps me to embrace a little bit to say, in the same way that my body is guiding every cell, and my mind is guiding every cell in my body, the divine force is guiding all of us in everything we go through. And then, of course, we have to just let go of the intellect, because faith is not about figuring it out that way.
Letting go of the intellect. To me, this is like the highest practice that there is, and the challenge of being a human being, right? Because the intellect, sometimes I feel that the mind is put into kind of a negative category of something that is bad, and that doesn't resonate well with me either. What I like to do is honor the mind. You are wonderful, what you're able to figure out and perceive, and what human beings have been able to accomplish with the mind is remarkable. At the same time, don't think that you can know everything. So it's like, because I can know so much,
Right.
sometimes my mind gets deluded into thinking that it can know everything.
Right.
And that's the danger.
Yeah. The monkey mind metaphor, right? I love that metaphor because our minds do sort of seem to have a life of their own, right? Start thinking about this and start thinking about that. And one of the great teachings that Swami Satchidananda gave us is that our mind can be our best friend or our worst enemy. Right? It could plague us with fears and anxieties and confusion and misperception of everything that's going on. Or it can help us stay focused on the greater spiritual truths. So you're right. A mind is a beautiful thing as long as we are managing it as opposed to it managing us.
Right. Yeah. And maybe the it managing us is when the ego takes over to thinking that, my opinions are so great. And if only things were the way that I want them to be, then the world would be a better place. One thing I wanted to ask you about is this idea of an ego as pure as crystal, right? So what does it mean to have a pure ego? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's ultimately about having the mind still enough that it can reflect the divine light, which is us. It's only through that pure mind that we can see who we are. Stillness is the ultimate goal. I should say stillness is the means to the end, and then the ultimate goal is that awakening. So just think about a piece of crystal. You mentioned crystal clear, right? But think about a piece of crystal. We can look through it. It's clear. Light comes right through it. There are no impurities. There's no carbon filled with it. It's just beautiful and clear, and it's letting everything come through. And that's us, and that's what we are shooting for, is a mind that is pure and still enough that we can then see who we are, the divine being. We're one with that being. There's no separate, right? The non-dualists, not this, not that, not me, not you. That's separate. Just is an illusion. So having a pure, still, crystal clear mind and heart allows that light that's within us to shine.
But would you say that is a pure ego, or is that a dissipation of the ego?
It's a good question. I think I think it could be one and the same. I think when the ego becomes so pure, then it sort of just steps out of the way. Master Shivananda used to sing, "When will I see thee, my beloved God, my divine being? When will I see thee? When I ceases to exist." So it's the same thing, right? When will I behold the true divine being? When there's no I who's trying to do anything. And then, is the ego pure? Is the ego God? I think it may be academic, right?
And so do you believe that, this happens and then there's no I? Like you have an experience happens where the I ceases to exist And then I'm just dissolve into oneness, or however you want to put it, and remain there. Or is the experience that you can have moments of time where the I ceases to exist, and then the I comes back again, and then the I ceases to exist again, and then it comes back again. Which is it?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Once the I is gone, is quiet, is pure, when we have that awakening, there's actually, the scriptures tell us, there's two types of awakening, right? So one is having the samadhis, different type of samadhis, is one having a samadhi where there's still a seed of myself. But then the other is having a samadhi where that's gone. That's gone. So the mind doesn't cease to exist. If it did, everyone was God realized would just be like, like that. No, the mind ceases to exist, but then it's a pure instrument. But I remember once, Avi, again, it was another satsang in Yogaville, and someone said to Swami Satchidananda, do you have thoughts that trouble you? Has all of your thoughts gone? And he said, no, they're not gone, but I don't pay so much attention to them. It's like they are in a distance. They are in a background. So when I say when we have that awakening, as if it's a moment in time, this is the awakening. It's right now. We just want to see it a little more. So the personality still exists, but any tendency to act selfishly is what we are told dissipates.
So have you had any moments of that where you feel that the seed of yourself, I think as you put it, is gone? That's not there. There's no identity of yourself.
Mm.
And I guess that's, maybe I'll leave it at there. Have you had any experiences of that? And then I'm curious, if you have, what happens after that?
Mm. I did have an experience. Actually, I've had an experience one, then I'll tell you a little more what I have a little more often. I had an experience once, and I was in a very quiet, meditative state, almost like a dream state. And in it, Swami Satchidananda was there. And he went, and I thought it was to give me a nice big kiss, right? And he came and he sort of pulled me to him. And instead, what happened is he pulled me into him. There's no kiss. He pulled me into him. And there was nothing but light and joy. For however long that lasted, there was no Shankar, there was no Bruce. There was nothing except that pure consciousness, that pure light. And it was joyous. It lasted for however long it lasted, right? And then I was sort of, you could say, quote unquote, returned to my normal consciousness. So I think that was like you go to movies and you see a trailer for an upcoming movie. I think that was like a trailer. It's like, okay, this is what's awaiting you when you can stay in that peaceful state. But the other thing, obviously, is that when my meditations are really, really deep and I'm connecting with the divine, I feel the jolt of the Shakti going through my entire body. And it is so joyous. Now, I'm not dissociated from my consciousness then. If you said, hey, who's this going? Who's happening this to? Well, I'd say, it's happening to me. So that experiencing that consciousness, I believe we could experience it in different ways, what we're ready for, our beliefs. And I think, and this is what the scriptures have told us, is that we can go into that beautiful state and then slowly sink back into, our beliefs that I'm myself. Even in the Bhagavad Gita, you may remember this, there's one scene where Krishna and Arjuna were talking. And Arjuna says to Krishna, I'm so pleased you act like my friend. We hang out together. You drive my chariot for me. But I know that you really are God. Can you show me your true self? Show me what you really look like. I'd like to have that. I'd like to have that. And Krishna, again, who's God, says, you sure? Are you sure you want to have that? And Krishna says, yeah, I really, Arjuna says, yeah, I really want that. And then it's a famous painting, a poster of God revealing himself to Arjuna. I even have the painting up somewhere. Arjuna is bowing like this. And Krishna as the divine being, you see all the worlds, all his faces, all his hands everywhere. Right? And it's overwhelming for Arjuna. It's overwhelming. And at one point he says, Krishna, please, I can't take it anymore. I can't really absorb your true, vast, infinite self. Could you please return me back to normal consciousness? And then Arjuna sort of comes back slowly. So I do think we can, that's a long-winded way of answering the question. I think we can move into that, some semblance of that divine state, right? And then maybe sink back into ourselves. But when we make the real leap, there's no coming back. There's no risk. Oh, I'm going to fall back into my old ways. I think these are maybe, like we said, trailers of what's going to come.
What does that mean, like the real leap? Like to become an enlightened person you're talking about, or after you pass the leap?
No. The final God realization, right? To become a jiva mukti, right? Someone who still has a body, a mind, but is enlightened to the great spiritual truths of oneself and everything in the universe. So
someone who's attained that,
yes.
Do you think that there's still fluctuations happening for them, or no fluctuations are happening at all?
I think there's no fluctuations, because all the scriptures say once you do that, once you achieve that state, it's permanent. You realize it's always been like that. It always will be like that. That you are not different than the infinite being. That your true nature is consciousness, infinite consciousness. Master Shivananda and Gurudev sang, Shivoham, Shivoham, Shivoham Soham. Haruhalume Alumasta Satchidanandaham. I am Shiva. Shiva, the pure consciousness. I am Shiva, Shiva I am. In all conditions, I am knowledge, bliss, absolute. I am that Satchidananda. I think when you get there, there's no coming in and out. There's no like walking in the building. Okay, now I'm walking out, so I'll go have an ice cream. I'm back to being myself. In fact, that was a good line. I'm back to being myself. Myself, capital S, the true. That's it. So there's no walking in and out of the building. I am the building. I am that consciousness. That's what I believe, and I promise if I get there, Avi, I'll let you know.
I don't know if you can promise that, because once you get there, it's going to be,
okay. So I'm talking to myself. Here's a promise. We have to make the Avi. If you grant that, then I got to tell him what's it really like.
Okay, I'm curious what your relationship is with scriptures or teachers, because you're referring to, okay, the scripture says, this is what the scripture says. Right. And so which path do you follow in terms of what you believe is truth? What the scripture says to, I believe this is so far kind of beyond me that I'm trusting this. Or do you look more to your internal experience and your internal guru to ask what is true?
So the answer is both, but I'll explain that a little more. If a teacher says, here's the truth, we have the right to say, show me what the scriptural authority for that is. We've been around for 10,000 years. There are great scriptures from so many traditions. You say that's the truth. Okay, what's the scriptural authority for that? Swami Gurudev said this to us. He said, don't believe me. Ask me, what's the scriptural authority for that? And every time anybody sort of said, oh, what is it? He'd say, that's right out of the Bhagavad Gita. He then quoted, right, in Sanskrit, right, or in Tamil. I think that's why we often heard him quoting, because he was giving us what the scriptures told us. He just translated in such an easy to understand everyday language. So I've always looked for the correlation between what the scripture says and what the teacher says, right? And I've always found it. I remember once, Avi, Gurudev always said, he once even said, my God is peace, right? My God is peace. And of course, peace is such an important part of our integral yoga path. I was reading some scripture, and in it, it said, you can have peace as your God. And I go, whoa, that's what Gurudev has always been saying. But he never said it's in this scripture, chapter 27. He never said it. But it said, you can have peace as your God. And I just was blown away, right? And so many other times, Gurudev would do something or say something that later on, maybe years later on, I would find the scripture. Not that I was looking for it, but I would come across the scripture that said, oh, right, that's what he said. That's what he meant. So we can trust our teacher, but I like the Gurudev sort of, you want proof? Okay, good. I'll give you proof. In fact, Avi, I don't know if you ever heard the story. It's when someone say, how do you know that someone's a legit teacher, right? How can you assess that, especially before you want to take initiation with that teacher? And he says, here's what you do. He said, break into his house. He wasn't kidding. Break into his house, hide behind the curtains, and see what he does when nobody's looking. Does he seem to be that peaceful fellow, that joyful fellow, or was that just an act that he's somebody else? Check that out, he said. Check it out. Don't believe it for yourself. Check it out. So I really always loved his willingness to go to evidence, right, for what he was teaching.
Yeah, but what I hear you saying is that the evidence is the scripture, which is the authority.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying that the authority is the scripture itself, whether it's the Bhagavad Gita or the Bible, whatever your tradition is.
Mm-hmm.
Really what I was asking about wasn't like the assessing of the teacher. I was kind of saying like the teacher and the scriptures are kind of, I was putting that in one category, something external from my own being, whether it's scripture or teacher that's outside of myself.
Right.
So am I saying that this teacher or scripture knows what's best for me more than me?
Mm.
Or am I searching inside for the answer that feels right to me? Yeah. That's my question.
Okay, good. Thank you for clarifying. And I think my answer is still the same sarcastic answer of if it's both, but let me explain a little. Remember how I said scripture is, Swami Satchidananda always says, validated by scripture, but that wasn't the only thing he said. He said you validate this by A, scripture, and B, your own experience. So he never wanted us to go accept scripture or anything he said that was contradictory to our experience. So how do we digest that? What does that mean? So if I had an experience and it felt legitimate to me and divine, he's saying, okay, trust that, go with that, trust that. Now, as those words are coming out of my mouth, I'm recognizing that it's complicated, because what if I'm wrong? What if I'm screwed up? What if that's the very reason I'm coming to the guru to say, I don't know? The answer has to be now where you come back to have faith. Faith in the scripture, faith in the teachings. But the willingness to self-assess, right? Because, so let's say maybe I blew up at somebody and I felt justified. They did something wrong. They're an evil person, this or that. Well, it could be that, am I right or am I wrong? Because I could be wrong. I could be, oh my God, that was triggered some other stuff going inside of me. I wasn't right to yell at that person. So I think that's where, for me, I'll tell you what I do, Avi. It's a good question. It's very hard. But I think what I do is I say, look, I want to know the truth here. Please show me the truth. I think I know the truth. Please let me know if I'm right or wrong. I don't think I know the truth. Please let me know if I'm right or wrong. And I don't think, God is some person sitting on a throne with a long white beard and a crown on his head, just, controlling the massive waves of the universe. I think our relationship to the divine is very, very intimate and very personal, or it can be. And when we say, please help me, I'm turning to you. If you believe as God is the divine mother, Mom, I'm coming to you. I'm your son. I'm your child. I need help. The scriptures say a good mother never turns away a child. Even a bad mother doesn't turn away from their child. So I'm the worst child, Mom, and I really need your help. Well, if you approach any aspect of God with that sincerity and say, please help me, I will tell you, Avi, 100%, I've always found I've gotten that guidance. Sometimes in the form of intellectual knowledge, sometimes in the form of somebody just saying something randomly, and oh no, it's not random. That's what I was looking for. I have to be willing to listen carefully to the whispers in the universe when you ask for that guidance. But I've always gotten it. And if I have that confusion, is it what I think? Is it what the teacher says? Is it the scriptures, something else? I just say, hey, it's beyond me. I'm confused. It's beyond me. Please help. And then I've always gotten that guidance.
Do you feel that the divine is something outside of yourself or also within?
Yes. I'm probably a very unsatisfactory interviewee because I always keep saying yes, it's both. But the reason why it's both is because, I have a great story to tell you that's like evidence of that. Yes, Jesus taught us the kingdom of heaven is within us. All the great scriptures tell us that the answers are within. The answers are within. And yet there are so many stories where devotees have seen God in its physical form. Shiva comes to me. Divine Mother comes to me and does this or does that. So how can it be inside and not outside? If it's outside, then everything says, I am that. Tattvamasi. I am one with that. So how could it be only outside if the scriptures tell us I'm one with that? And if it's only me, well, I don't get that because I have gas, I have pains, I have sorrow. I'm here. This is what my face looks like now. 30 years ago, my face didn't look this way, so it can't be that. So it's a wonderful question. It's wonderful contemplation. And I do think that God is all of this. God can manifest in a very distinct form if we love and worship that form, and certainly that divine being, I am my beloved.
I'm wondering though, is a lot of the suffering that we experience, does that come from forgetting that I am that?
Absolutely, bro. Absolutely. I think, okay, I'm this. Oh, here, I'm good. I have a dear friend. He's just been diagnosed with prostate cancer. He's going through hell. You could understand that. He's going through hell. At this moment in time, he feels that he is the body. He is the body. And if I feel like I'm the body and then I'm diagnosed with some disease, I will be profound suffering because I've forgotten that I'm more than this body. So yes, I think our pain and suffering do come from our forgetting the divine truth.
I wanted to ask you about, counseling, because I know you've done a bunch of that, just relationships in general. It seems to be maybe the greatest challenge that we have to have healthy relationships. What do you think is key to having a healthy relationship with another person?
I think we can answer it from several different levels. At the highest level, remembering that I am one with this other person. We are both united together in the divine light. Certainly puts us, everything we go through, in a different sense. In a more worldly sense, it comes full circle to what we said earlier. If everything that happens for good and my loved one yelled at me or did something that I perceived hurt me, then instead of lashing back, which is the ego's automatic response, instead I say, wait, is there something I should learn about this? Is there something I need to know about myself? Maybe my beloved sees something in me I don't see. They certainly think they do. You don't know. You're right. So maybe they're right. And then, obviously, great question. So to know that I am truly one with my beloved, to be open enough to what it is they have to say. And then I think it's also love and forgiveness, of course, have to be in the mix. If they hurt me, do I go to a place of anger or do I go to a place of love and forgiveness? And it's not to say I would stay in a relationship no matter what, but let's use that as our default. When I've been in a relationship since the 70s, I've been married. And when my wife and I go through difficulties, these days I'm asking, okay, what could I do differently? What do I have to give up? What do I have to let go of? And also just to know to keep my peace, whatever it is that my spouse says, to keep my peace. Now, I'm quick to give her feedback on what I think she needs to do differently, but that's not the first place I go, because then it's about, okay, well, but you, me, but you, that's not helpful. But if I think then a little later on in a quieter space, and I could say, I know I need to do this differently. I just want to say, when you do that, here's how I feel. Then we can also have a dialogue about it. So non-defensive communication and accountability. Now, I don't know if there's any scripture for that one. I haven't seen it before. But we're enlightened enough in this era to know we're accountable for our own actions, and we're accountable for how we affect other people too. That's our love. I was blessed enough, Avi, in college to have a professor who had profound wisdom about accountability and relationships. We used to go to his house. I went to NYU for undergraduate, and we used to go to his apartment in Greenwich Village, and he and his wife taught a course on accountability. And it shaped me all my life, all my life. So yes, we're accountable. We're each accountable. We should love, we should forgive, we should learn, and keep our peace no matter what.
Has it been a process for you to elevate that priority of keeping your peace, no matter what? Because it does seem like it's a matter of priority to me, right? Like all these different things are in my mind that feel important, but which one is the most important? So I can make that firm commitment to peace.
Right.
Peace is the number one.
Yes.
And the firmer I am in that, maybe the more I can remember.
Right. And the firmer I am in that, the better I can listen. When we're talking about relationships, deep listening is like the number one priority. I can't listen well if I don't keep my peace. If I don't keep my peace, all I want to do is assert my truth. Yes, but you did this, but I, need this and that. All I could do is just debate. Debate's not helpful this way. But
I find it's so tricky when we're interacting with other people, right? It's like it's spoken about kind of like the vacuum of meditation, right? Like I can be peaceful, on the mat, on the cushion, but then when I'm interacting with life, that goes out the window, right? And I feel that's really, really true. And what's so challenging is all the years that I've kind of conditioned myself to engage with other people when we're using words in a certain way. Mm-hmm. So I'm standing in my peace, what I observe, I'm in my peace, right? And then now is the time to speak. It's so hard to speak in a way that's different from what I'm used to. Even if my intention is not to debate, if that's what I've been practicing for so long, it feels like it's going to come out in that form where it turns into a debate. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, we want to debate because we want to be right. We want to be right. So that's another aspect in a relationship. The need to be right is deadly, right? It's deadly because if I'm right, unless you agree with me, that means that you're wrong. So now we have a dynamic where I'm right, you're wrong. I'm telling you I'm right. I'm telling you you're wrong. I'm marginalizing you. I'm minimizing what you're saying. I'm minimizing how you feel. That doesn't float, right? That doesn't lead to a sustainable relationship. So the willingness to let go of being right is so important. And it's so hard because I know I'm right. At least that's what my mind says, right? I know I'm right. But if I keep asserting that, this relationship won't last much longer.
Right, like I've heard it said, do you want to be right or do you want to have a relationship?
Exactly.
That's the choice, right?
Do you know when Swami Satchidananda would marry people, he would always give a talk at the latter part of the ceremony. And he would always say that, your relationship would be filled with love and happiness, but you should give each other some hot pickles every once in a while. The Indian pickle, right? Hot pickle. He'd say, because that's how you grow. You don't grow by always being lovey-dovey. Oh, dear, how are you? Oh, I'm so happy. Oh, I love you today. I really love you today. And that's it. That's not how we grow. Right? We grow by, a partner comes and said, "Ooh, you got a zit that's the size of a hornet's nest. It looks horrible. You shouldn't go out today. It looks horrible." Okay, now my mind wants to react. Who is she telling me I look horrible? Blah, 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 blah. Chance to be reactive, or a chance to go into my peace and probably say, "Oh, thanks. Thank you, dear. Sorry you have to look at it. Thank you." Wow, that's a beautiful response. So, yeah, we can't expect perfectly peaceful relationships. They actually won't serve us very well.
But I personally don't feel called to ever have an intention to offer someone a hot pickle. To me, those things just happen naturally.
Yes.
Like,
yeah. And he didn't mean like wake up and figure out how I'm going to irritate my partner today.
Right.
Yeah. No, like you said, they happen because we have egos and each of us is still learning and growing. So we're going to bump up against each other. Yeah. And he was saying, that's okay. It's okay.
Wondering, you've worked with criminal youth a bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anything in particular that you've drawn from those experiences working with people that maybe are specifically, young and committed crimes, and what that experience has been like for them, why they committed a crime, and the process for moving through it?
Yeah. I did that work many years ago, Avi, and I didn't have our yoga framework that I do now. But one of the things that all the people who were the most successful in my field did working with these young people is they saw the light within them. They saw the good within them. Now, they were no BS people. No BS. They called other people on their stuff. But they still, fundamentally, underneath it all, they saw the goodness in the other person. And that's what Swami Satchidananda did in so many cases. Somebody would come to him and horrible person did horrible things, and he would look at them and he'd say, you're really a good boy. You're really a good person. I see that in you. I go, what do you mean? I did this and that. No, you're really good. And that would just like shake people out of their own negative self-image and call to the divine within them. So obviously, young people need a lot of help. Maybe they need a change of environment. Maybe they need help with many other things. But seeing that good or God, just take away 1-0 in them, I think is the key. And it's the key in all counseling, I think, Avi, right?
And maybe all relationships, right? Like I'm wondering about, that to is it possible for us to love everyone, to have that be the foundation? Not that, right, can't point something out or see that some change could be helpful. But that's the sense that I have of Swami Satchidananda too, is that he was able to do that. He practiced that, loving everyone, seeing the good in everyone.
Yes.
And man, it's such a, what a practice to have. I'm wondering for you, do you find success in that, in seeing the good in everyone, loving everyone?
It's of course a work in progress, right? I heard something that a dear friend of mine did just in the last 24 hours, and I was saying, what the heck was she thinking? She did something that I think hurt some of the people, even hurt integral yoga. She felt justified. And, can I still see the good in her? It's hard at times like that, right? When someone takes an action that's hurtful to others. But when I talk to them, Avi, it's actually easier to see the good in them. It's easier to remind myself that this is a divine person just going through their stuff. So I haven't mastered it yet by far, but it's a little easier when instead of thinking about them, interacting with them to see their goodness, That helps me.
I noticed that too. Thank you for reinforcing that, because in my own mind, I'll note like when the other person isn't there and I'm kind of ruminating on what happened, I'm feeling anger and frustration, and all these different things about the person.
Right.
But then when they're right in front of me, and it's kind of like, that's game time, you're looking into someone else's eye.
Yes.
Then you really see how you feel about them.
Right.
And more and more for me, as I'm prioritizing the love of this practice, it's like, okay, all the other things are kind of superfluous.
Yeah.
The love is the important thing.
That's beautiful. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Shankar, thank you so much. Really appreciated this time and getting to know you and everything that you're doing. Yeah. Glad that you're a part of Integral Yoga community, for sure. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, my fundamental experience with all this is profound gratitude. So I am so grateful for everything I've been given. And happy if I can even share a tiny bit of that back with others. That's a blessing. So thank you, brother.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this content and think others might as well, please feel free to share and subscribe.